Okay. And we are live. Hello and welcome to this edition of the Builders AI Forum webinar series. Today we will be exploring how the church should be leveraging AI. My name is Benjamin Crockett and I'll be hosting this conversation. And to unpack this question, we are joined by Edmundo Reyes, co-founder and partner of Digital Continent, Emily Mentock, co-founder and head of content and creative at Real Plus True, Zac Johnson, co-founder at Truthly, and Ryan Scheel, partner and chief operating officer of Fuzati. These are just two notes on housekeeping. This is meant to be an interactive conversation, and I've told the panelists to please jump in, to feel free to disagree with one another, and for all of you watching online, please write your questions in the comments, and we will try and get to as many as we can at the end. So let's get right to it. How should the church be leveraging AI? When we think of the church and past technologies, for much of the church's history, it has been at the cutting edge of technology. I was recently at the Vatican Observatory for a tour, and it's extraordinary. You come face to face with the incredible scientific legacy pioneered by the church. Ryan, if I may begin with you, looking at the church's history of pioneering technology, from the printing press to the Vatican Observatory, do you think the church right now is more in danger of missing the evangelization opportunity that AI offers, or more in danger of compromising its mission by embracing a technology that may ultimately diminish the human dignity it seeks to serve?
Well, thanks for having me here, and I appreciate the question. I would go back even further in the technology. I would go back to the technology that was really the peak of communication design at the time of the founding of Christianity, which is the Roman road system. And this is an analogy that we use a lot at Fuzati when we're talking to our clients when they might have reservations about using a particular piece of technology. The Roman road system was the same system that Rome used to conquer the entire world through military might, bloodshed, and subjugation. But it was also the same system that the apostles were able to use to travel throughout the empire and reach people all across the known world and the Mediterranean at the time. And if you're afraid to use those very roads that the powers that be will use against you, you will necessarily be unsuccessful. So I think that the church does have an absolute need and an obligation to always be on the cutting edge of technologies as they emerge, but to use them in the way that the apostles used them, to use them as a way to subvert the negative parts of culture, to be a sign of contradiction, but to also embrace them for what they can provide in the means of evangelization. So, there is some ethical concerns with AI, but there's also so many opportunities. And I think the church would be terribly remiss if they didn't leverage those, just like the apostles, just like Maximilian Kolbe with the printing press, just like Fulton Sheen with radio, and Mother Angelica with cable, or Bishop Barron with YouTube. That is, I think, one of the calling of a Catholic in the evangelical sense, to be able to use technologies. And sure, there's going to be moral problems, but if we are using them for morally right reasons, I think we can overcome that pretty easily.
And Emily, when you look at those opportunities that AI presents, where are opportunities that you feel the church absolutely should be leveraging? Where do you see AI in your eyes sparkle and you say, okay, this is perfect?
Right, absolutely. Well, the church makes it really clear for us that any technology that we do develop needs to be oriented toward the good of all people and toward human flourishing. And we know that artificial intelligence, in its widest definition, presents a lot of opportunities for that in how we develop it in science, in medical uses, in technology that help us do more efficient and better use and distribution of resources. But we can never be under the illusion that that technology is neutral and only dependent on how we use it or whose hands it's in. The church makes really clear for us in Laudato Si and in the Catechism that all technology, by its existence and our choice to build it and engage with it, makes a decision, projects a moral consequence about the kind of society we want to build. So this applies to artificial intelligence as well. We want to build a society that can heal the sick or solve environmental crises by using artificial intelligence to study droughts and weather patterns and save lives that way. But we also have to acknowledge the risks and consequences that come with developing that technology. So I think that the church has her voice in the right place in saying, it's not neutral, and we need to be honest and even prophetic about the future consequences of continuing to develop this technology in any industry.
And Edmundo, when you look at technology, and Ryan and Emily have spoken a little bit about this in terms of it, not being neutral, and we have to use the technology though to get in there and to evangelize. What do you see as the main challenge in adopting AI without compromising church teachings?
Benjamin, thank you so much for inviting us and inviting me to be part of this panel. I love this question. We recently are developing a project called the Faith and AI Project. And we think in these terms. We think in the way that the church should be engaging is in helping people understand what AI is and is not. I think there's confusion sometimes, and that leads to fears. I think we also need to help people navigate the new context that AI is creating, the new pastoral context. So the church has an important role on helping people, and especially church leaders, navigate this changing context. And then the third one is we want people to harness AI for good, right? So the way that I think about it is, how do we leverage the church's wisdom? We have a lot of wisdom in this area, not just ethics and morality, but also in terms of philosophy and theology and human anthropology. How do we leverage all of that? How do we bring that wisdom to the conversation? So that would be number one. How do we help people move from fear to confidence, right? Through wisdom. And then the other one is, where are the good news in all of that? Where can we be a light, and how can we use these technologies? So to bring this to application, I want to share a framework that we used at the Archdiocese of Detroit when I was part of the work there. We separated the work in two fronts, and every parish can do the same, and every apostolate could do the same. You have the mission support elements, finance, HR, technology, and then you have the mission direct elements of what you do as an apostolate, diocese, or parish. So to start with mission support, that's an easy way for parishes, dioceses, apostolates to be using AI, right? That's the no-brainer. A quick example is that AI is very powerful to analyze data, and the mission support, there's a lot of data that you can analyze: financial data, giving data, stewardship data. That is a no-brainer. You can use it, and AI as a tool is going to be very powerful, and it's going to do what data scientists would do for you, or it would be very expensive to do, right? That part is a no-brainer. When it gets tricky, it's on the mission direct. And why it gets tricky, right? Because nobody wants their pastor to be, sharing homilies or preaching homilies that were created with AI. So there's something there that we all know that is wrong. And I was trying to define it, and I came up with these, right? Like in ministry, right? The work of the church, right? We wanted to continue to be inspired by the Holy Spirit, under discernment, right? From well-formed agents, ministers, right? So AI cannot do that, but where it can help is on a super agent or super aid to the work that it's done. So one example I want to share with you guys is just yesterday I was meeting with someone who's developing a tool on social listening. That's a very interesting use of AI for the mission direct part of it. Social listening is something that is applied in marketing, PR, communications in a secular context. Brands and companies are listening to the sentiments of people regarding their products, regarding their market, regarding their needs. So that's something that is used out there. In the Catholic context, we don't use that a lot. But in a synodal church that is supposed to listen to people, we could use these tools powered by AI to start understanding sentiments about the things that we care about as Catholics and Christians, and the things that people care about. So social listening powered by AI, that's a great use on the missions direct side of things that parishes and dioceses should be using.
Beautiful. Thank you, Edmundo. And there was a question here that was raised to that point, and then I want to get Zac's opinion here. But here's a comment that just literally came up while you were speaking, Edmundo. It says, if an AI chatbot is proven to provide objectively better, more consistent answers than an overwhelmed priest or volunteered, should the church endorse it as a primary resource?
That's a great question. So I was talking to a friend that helps parishes and parish ministers. And within that learning community, and I'll talk more about that, they were talking about that use case. That's a very interesting one. If you load up, for example, this is a very simple thing that a parish could do. If you load up all the information relevant to a program or to the parish services into something like a Google Notebook LM, where you can have information there, you can create a custom chatbot that can answer questions. That's a better way to serve your parish community than just to frequently asked questions or having to dial the parish secretary and ask those questions. I mean, we know that, especially younger generations, they won't pick up the phone and dial the secretary and get the answers they want. They want online and they want to get it. So there's a way to even use simple tools that are available for everyone right now to load all those documents, to put all the information of a program on a parish, and then just create that custom chatbot. I mean, you could do it in minutes, right? As long as you load all the information, and then that AI is only looking at that information and giving answers. So it's a very simple way to use AI in a parish context that can really help your parishioners, can help the people that you're serving.
There was a word in there in that question, Joe, though, objectively, that it's providing an objectively better answer. That is a loaded word right there, because is it objectively better if it gets to the heart of the matter or is more factually correct? Or is it objectively better, being that we are an incarnational person, that answer is coming from a priest? I would struggle to see in any scenario where a chatbot that has no real clear guidelines how it could ever get an imprimatur from the church. And there's a reason the church has imprimaturs. There might be a better study Bible than the one that the church gives an imprimatur to, but that doesn't mean that should be the source for Catholics to go to. We have to trust in the leadership. We have to trust in the shepherding and the spiritual guidance that the church provides. So when we say something is objectively better, what does that mean? Objectively better? Is it quicker, faster, directly answered? Well, I mean, honestly, a Wikipedia article is probably objectively better on theology than a lot of priests. Is that a better answer? So I think we have to talk about, what are we really trying to get to here? I mean, we are a church of people, not a church of in a Greek sense, disembodied souls. We're incarnational, right? So the second you start saying something that is not incarnational, is not sacramental, is not from the consecrated and devoted life of a priest, well, I think you start to then blur the word of what objective actually means. And that's where I would be careful on that question.
Oh, beautiful. And thank you, Ryan, for that. One of the questions, and I want to throw this now to Zac, is what do you see, Zac, as the role of wisdom in the age of AI? To Ryan's point of efficient, maybe let's say quick, solid, bite-sized responses. I mean, that's fantastic on a lot of levels. But of course, as we're embodied beings, and we're the church is a living beings, in space and time together in that community. Where do you see the risk of all of this becoming just about efficiency, speed, quick, easy, clickbait, responses?
Yeah, no, good question. I think AI is, and especially kind of, we're talking about AI chatbots here, they're meant to be a tool, and a tool is only as good as the person using it. So a hammer as a tool in my hand is not going to be, I'm not going to be a very good user of a hammer, unlike a very skilled carpenter who can use a tool like a hammer and build something pretty incredible, build something beautiful. So wisdom is essential in this age, maybe more than ever, because if we're not wise people, if we're not formed, if we're not becoming who God made us to be, we can't use a tool, whether it be a hammer, the internet, or AI, to actually create something that's worth creating. I just saw something, maybe you guys saw this earlier, this sort of thing going around the internet right now about work slop. So like colleagues are able to detect when one of their coworkers are just using AI to create low-hanging fruit work product, and it's having detrimental effects to these people's reputation, because it's pretty obvious if you're just using AI and you don't have any wisdom, if you don't actually have any formation, if you're not trying to grow, if you're using AI to replace your mind instead of enhance it or make you a more effective person at your job, that's gonna come out pretty quickly and pretty easily. It's kind of easy to spot. And going back to that first question, I love that question, because what I think it does, if, I'm not going to fight the hypothetical, if it's true that AI an AI chat is giving a better answer than maybe my local parish priest. Not to fight the hypothetical, if that is true, what I love about that is that I think it challenges us to be better people. Going back to my first point here, to be better humans, because if AI is being a better, simulated human than me, that I think that's actually on me. I want to be able to step up my game and do even better, because I think that's a reflection of maybe where we've dropped the ball in different ways, where we haven't quite been as excellent in our vocations as we could have been. So instead of maybe seeing that in a negative light, I like to look at that and say, okay, if that's true, I want to take that as a challenge to be better and to grow, so that, hopefully, ideally we wouldn't need AI to be answering people's questions, right? We live in the world where that, it's a helpful tool, but it'd be pretty awesome if all of us were such good humans that we could do it on the spot and answer questions really well, even better than AI would.
Beautiful. Thank you, Zach. We have another question here that I want to throw to all of you. And this is from Mary from the UK. And she said, what specific routine tasks of a parish director or catechist can and should be outsourced to AI to free them for human relational ministry? Do any of you guys want to jump in on that one?
Well, sure. I think that's one of the things that at Fusati we focus on is implementation. There's groups like Magisterium that is really focusing on the development of systems. At Fusati, we focus on implementation. And what that means is look internally at what your tasks are that are repeating, that are not highly skilled, that are not, I guess, just kind of your grunt work. Those are the first ones that you should look to replace, because as our vice president of technology at Fusati, Thaddeus Ruskowski, he says, and he tells this to our employees, is that AI is a superpower. It enhances you. It doesn't replace you. So if you're using it to do simple things like video editing, if you're doing it to do things like you said, Edmundo, data analytics, which is incredibly powerful, if you're using it to do things like accounting, better scheduling, to help you to write drafts of announcements, to help research technologies, to help planning, those are the things that take up a lot of time but aren't necessarily highly skilled work. So what that does is it enhances you and it frees you to do more without replacing you. It's that superpower concept, that enhancement concept that Zach was also speaking about. That's where I'd look first is, to name any specific one, it might be different from parish to parish, but look at the things that are repeatable, take a lot of time, and are not highly skilled. Those are good things to look to find solutions to replace with AI.
Yeah. I want to offer some examples that are a bit more on there's the basic stuff, and I agree with Ryan. There's the super basic stuff that you should be doing with AI, right? And again, using that framework of mission support, mission direct, I think a lot of the things on the mission support side of things, on the finance part, on even some of the HR automations that you can do, that should be a no-brainer. But if you think of AI, not someone that is going to write on your behalf, but like Ryan was saying, like a super assistant or a super aide to help you do things. So I'm gonna put out there an example of something a bit more creative that you can start considering in your parish. Now, this is not to you should do these, but something that you could do if you feel inclined to do it and that it's going to support the work that you do. So let's say that you're planning a lesson, you're a catechist in your parish, and you're planning a lesson for a specific group in your parish. Usually what you get from your parish or from the curriculum that you have purchased is a very generic program. But you can help think about preparing your lesson with AI by doing two things. One is providing context, and then the other one is providing constraints. So you can prepare your lesson. You have to be preparing it, but you can ask AI to help you with context. So for example, my lesson is for a seventh graders, all boys class. How do I adapt what I have here for that context of all boys, seventh graders? And also my constraint is going to be that I only have 20 minutes because we need to do other activities for that day. So now you're using a thinking partner that is not replacing you, but is allowing you to adapt perhaps the plan that you had for that lesson that was informed by what the parish provided in terms of curriculum, but it's informed by your own experience. But now you have someone else that is going to be helping you think it through and adapt it to that circumstances. So I think AI is super helpful for context and constraints. And then you need to bring the framework. You need to be putting in the framework the way that you're going to be thinking about your lesson. So that would be something a bit more on the more advanced or more out there, things that people can do that maybe they're not thinking of doing right now.
Fantastic. And Emily, going to you, I'm aware of some of the incredible work that you and Real Plus Truth have done, opening up the catechism to everyone and to finding creative ways with podcasts, media, and all that. Where do you see AI, the potential of AI, in opening up the catechism and opening up the incredible literature and body of work of the church for evangelization?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of creative potential, like Edmundo said, but I think you have to balance that with what the church calls us to, that Ryan has already also touched on, which is that incarnational aspect of it, and always pointing to Jesus. So we're not just in the business of handing on information in interesting, creative, or easy to absorb ways, but the echoing down of our faith, that is catechesis, is all meant to point toward Jesus. So could an AI tool help a catechist prepare a lesson? Yes, but that AI tool is never going to know the individuals in your class the way that you do. When I think about the lesson that I prepared last week for the confirmation prep class that I have, 7th graders, very similar to Edmundo's hypothetical example. And it definitely could have been more efficient for me to get AI help for planning that lesson. But I think that more important was for me to take what I know about the class, to prayerfully think about that lesson. I actually wrote it down in a notebook instead of typing it first, because that helped my brain and heart slow down to think about them. And that's how I prepared. And then I can use AI tools to help me format the agenda that I'm going to share with the parents ahead of time, or things like that. But I think that when we're talking about sharing the gospel, it is a message. It's the good news, but that doesn't mean that it's just information and content. So there's a lot of things that in Real True, the way that AI improvements have helped creative tools get better and more efficient. And we're so glad to be able to have those at our disposal. And as a Catholic creative myself, and working with many of them over the years. But I also, I can actually share about the time that right when ChatGPT was coming out, we asked it to provide a script, that we would write for one of our videos to see what it could come up with. Like, here's our target audience. Here are the quotes of the catechism that we want to cover. We do a dialogue between two people with an intriguing hook that ends with this thesis, and it could provide something, but I think that it's always going to be more human and more oriented toward a personal relationship with God, either in yourself as the teacher, the catechist, or the evangelizer, or for the person that you are teaching or evangelizing to, when you make sure to bring your whole human heart, which is irreplaceable by AI, to that preparation.
Fantastic. And Zac, I'd like to turn to you. We have a few questions here in the comment section, so I just want to get to some of them. But one common theme in some of these comments that are appearing is the fact that people seem to be reflecting or experiencing kind of a fear towards the idea that something that is coming through an app, coming through a phone, makes us a consumer. And so some of the comments here are talking about a spiritual consumption. There's a few saying, well, why do we need a prayer app to help us pray? Of course, I would then respond saying, well, if it's helping us pray, that's a win. But there's some of these comments where people are nervous about the consumption aspect of technology, and the fact that it is kind of creating a routine that once the phone goes away, once the technology disappears, are we going to be still, praying or using these applications for Catholic purposes?
This is exactly where the church needs to have a voice, right? Is right here when it comes to mindless consumption of technology. That is rampant. I think we all know that's rampant in the world right now. And that's one of the main reasons why we're in a very bad place when it comes to knowing what's true, good, and beautiful, what the human person is for. I mean, I came of age just playing video games all day, right? And some of the best memories I have were playing video games with my dad. So like, some of it was good, but a lot of it, I just feel like I was robbed from a golden era of my own personal formation that I could have had as a younger person, because I love my parents, but they weren't really thinking about this concern and this question about how are we going to introduce technology to our kids, our families, our parishes. And so I think this right here is the best thing that the church can be leading here, is on this question of how do we properly use technology. And if someone were to ask me, so for instance, with Truthfully, why do I need Truthfully to learn about the Catholic faith? I'd say you don't. You don't need Truthfully to learn about the Catholic faith. In fact, we have there's 2,000 years of beautiful tradition, both written and oral, that you can learn. There's so many different ways to learn about our beautiful faith. We want to provide one option or one tool among many others, so that people have the option. If they want to use a tool like ours to learn about our faith, they can do that. One thing we're in particular very concerned about, though, is moving people from a tool like a smartphone or social media or AI, moving them from the phone back into real life. And so we always end, if you use our chat, we always end with reflective Socratic questions to get people engaged in their mind, to keep them from turning off their minds or becoming too dependent, and instead to turn it back introspectively so that they're actually thinking through the information that they're receiving, applying it, and then what we really want people to do is take what they've learned and go put it into practice in real life. Because what's the end of learning the truth? It's to live the life to the full, John 10:10, that Jesus came to give to us. So I would say the one point there is that we got, if you're in a great place where you don't need a tool like this, that's awesome. I actually feel like that's where we all should be and would like to be. I still use Truthfully every now and then, even though I also read a lot of books. But I also say we have a real heart for meeting the culture where it is and meeting the world where it is today. So if you look around, like I alluded to a second ago, if you look around in the world today, we're very low literacy. We have very, very minimal formation, if any. We don't know, by and large, in our culture, who Jesus is, what the Catholic Church teaches. It's very, very low formation. It's pretty bleak. And so what are kind of our average neighbors? Where are they going for information? A lot of times they're going to social media, they're going to apps, they're going to their phones, and now more and more turning to AI for information and for some amount of formation to know reality. So again, we don't want to sort of fight the hypothetical there. That's reality. And I don't want to fight that reality, although it makes me kind of depressed. Instead, I want to meet those people where they are, like our Lord meeting the woman caught in adultery, kind of coming down to her level, being with her in that moment, and then not staying there forever, but lifting her up and saying, go and sin no more. Here's something more. Here's something more beautiful. So with Truthfully, I would love it if people never needed smartphones, never needed AI. But what we really want to do is be there for the people who do feel like they want a tool like that, so that we can take them from where they are right now and help them with God's grace to find the beautiful life that God really wants for them.
I don't think anyone on this call would object to our children reading more books or have the goal of reading more books themselves. But if you read it like, I don't know, some medieval documents or Victorian or Renaissance, you'll hear parents complaining, my children are lost in books. They're always in fantasy. They're always reading books, and none of them are getting real world experience. They're not going out hunting. They're not farming. They're not using their hands. That's a parallel to what we have going on right now. I mean, these things are tools, and Edmundo spoke to it earlier, what AI is and what AI is not, right? It's a tool. I mean, if you look at pictures from the 50s, everyone's got their head buried in a newspaper. If you look at pictures from the 80s, everyone's sitting right in front of the TV. If you look at a picture from the 2000s, everyone's sitting in front of a computer. If you look out on the street now, everyone's got their face in a smartphone. It is human nature to consume data. We are voracious consumers of information. I mean, it's one of the things that makes the human mind so unique, is our ability to consume information, create patterns out of it. So it's not a threat that there are tools. These are tools, and it's the same moral dilemma. It's the same technological dilemma that we've had hundreds, if not thousands of times throughout the development of technology in history. What I'd say is that it's more important that this is an opportunity for the church to evangelize, because as technology becomes more pervasive and the speed of technology grows, people will start to realize more and more how incarnational they are and how there is a deeper need, how much they have a need for the incarnational, how much they have a need for something that is not silicon. And that is where the church can best answer it. So, I mean, obviously the church has to answer the ethical uses of AI, but the proper place, or maybe the more profoundly impactful place, is that the church answers the fallout, the spiritual, emotional, and physical fallout from technology. Yes, church, answer questions on technology. But more importantly, be a shepherd and tell people that there is more to life than this world has to offer. That would be where I think the church has a more primary impact and focus going forward.
Yeah, I would like to add something to that. As part of our Faith in AI project, we interview all these experts on AI, people that come from the technology side of things, from philosophy, from theology. One of the conversations that was so rich was with Leticia Garcia, and she works at the Harvard Business School. And she just was talking about something I think very important for us in the church, right? She was talking about learning leaders and learning communities. I think that a lot of people are using AI and they're not, talking about it in the workplace, and especially in the church settings. I think there's a little bit of shame if you're using it. And I think what she was encouraging is for leaders to step up, for principals, for pastors, and to have those conversations with their teams and how to model it. So leaders need to model how to use properly AI, how to harness AI for good in the right way with prudence. And then learning communities too, where, for example, in the context of a school, the teachers are able to talk about the use of AI, what they're seeing that is effective, what is not, what it shouldn't be used for, and so forth. So learning leaders and learning communities, I think the church needs that. I think that there's more people that aren't using it, that are not talking about it, and I think a conversation needs to happen in those settings. The second thing is another interview that we had with one of our advisors, Andrew DeBerry. We were talking about that people want guidelines. I think the church and the different components of the church at a local level, they should be developing guidelines where we draw a line on what we will use AI for and what we will not use AI for. Even at the family level, at the personal level, you can also have your guidelines in terms of what you're comfortable with AI and not. I think, from the top down, the Vatican and the conferences of bishops are working on those type of guidelines. But I think at a more granular level, at a school level, at a parish level, those things can be done there. And I think people they're seeking for those type of guidelines. And I think these learning leaders and learning communities can put together something that allow for people to use AI in the right context and for the right reasons and with prudence. I mean, in church ministry, I mean, we all want people to be, that ministry flows from a personal relationship with the Lord. We'll never eliminate that. Prayer, relationship with God will never eliminate formation, not just the spiritual, but also of the mind and the discernment, right, that we have in terms of being guided by the Holy Spirit. I mean, those things need to be there, but what are other things within the ministry that we can apply this powerful tool that we now have at our disposal? I think in all of these is to try to approach it with hope and with confidence, and not with fear and just the opposite of confidence and wisdom, right? So ignorance, I guess, would be the opposite.
And I have a question that goes through the loop of what Zac said, and then Ryan, and then you, Edmundo, which is, do you guys think that the parishes on any level are prepared to welcome, in large part the young who have been converted online, in the sense that, it seems that there is a Catholic revival going on right now, and a lot of people are getting their, kind of becoming intellectually converted from the conversations that they're hearing on podcasts, the articles they're reading online. It seems like the technology is doing an incredible job of sharing these, what's true, beauty, and good, and it feels that people are having that intellectual conversion after watching certain videos or reading things. But then when they come into the parish, are the parishes ready to welcome, in large part, these young people who haven't been properly catechized, who haven't, really, what I think is beautiful about a lot of these digital tools is that they're able to answer questions for long periods of times to people who wouldn't properly be, courageous or ready to go to a priest yet. And so the technology is facilitating those conversations. But then when these young people, and this is, obviously where I think the church can really leverage AIs to really spread this message and do this. But when they come into the parishes, who's there really ready to welcome them? Are the priests in formation? And this would be a question to some of you who are working in the education sphere. Are how exposed are they to this technology? There was just one quick point here before I'll throw it to all of you is I was speaking to a wonderful priest friend who was in confession, and he was talking about many young people are spending hours and hours and hours a day with these AI chatbots and building deep, what they think are deep relationships with this. And these are spiritual challenges that, of course, are unique to our time in certain sense, because the technology is facilitating this. And my question, and I think a question that the church should really be thinking about is, well, are we ready to really welcome these? Is the formation, are we able to accept, on some level, this challenge? I don't know if one of you would like to think about that.
I can jump in there. So my personal conversion and invitation back to the church came because I encountered Catholic creators online who are putting things on YouTube, like Father Barron and others that I've worked with. And that was my pathway back. But I did eventually, want to walk back into a church because I had become convicted that this is where I was called to go, that God loved me and wanted to meet me there. But you can't just stop at walking in. First of all, it's sometimes difficult to even find where to go to church. People might be even asking, ChatGPT at this point, like where do I go to church, and what kind of answers are being provided to them there? Or if they do look up their Catholic parish, do they have a functional website that says, here's our mass times and you are so welcome, let alone their experience of walking in the door with questions about things, or they've been formed online. And I think we have seen the church respond to the content boom over the past decade and contribute to that space there. Like Zac was saying, we are meeting people where they're at. And I think that the church has continued to improve at creating better and more evangelistic content, that higher quality, better storytelling in the online space. So that has, as you mentioned, brought some people back to the church as well. And I think that what they need to be able to find in our parishes is not just more information. They're going to find the sacraments there. They're going to find community there, and that they belong. And that is one thing that the parishes can offer. To the earlier point of what's an objectively better answer about faith formation? Is it that it's coming from a person? Is that it's clearer, shorter? And I think that our parishes should be discerning, not just because of this technological advancement, but for their missions as centers of evangelization in general, of representing the church in their community in general. How are we welcoming people who might walk through our doors? How are we going out to reach those people who might not yet have a physical present encounter with us on our parish campus, but how are we meeting them online? And I think that over the past years, and partially in response to better language throughout the church about the new evangelization, a lot of success stories being able to be shared digitally online about how parishes have evangelized, which offers up a case study for other parishes or ministries to use. So using these digital channels to advance positive stories about how this has been done well. We have seen the church take a new evangelistic turn. And we need to continue this as well through this intellectual formation trend that you're talking about. Now, I don't think the church will necessarily need to be ready for in mass people who have formed deep relationships with chatbots, or if Magisterium AI becomes so successful that now millions of people are walking into mass for the first time, that would be fantastic. But I think that at heart of what our parishes need to be able to do is point people to the sacraments and point people to Jesus, regardless of where they're coming from. And what the church makes very clear for us is that we need to be thinking about not just what's going to convert people because that's what's good for the church, but what is best for human flourishing. And I think our parishes can be prepared to respond to a changing society as well, and proactively reach out to those whose flourishing might be impacted by the development of this technology for better or for worse.
Yeah, I like what Emily said there. I mean, Thomas Aquinas literally wrote the book on theology. But when he had a metaphysical experience with Jesus Christ, his work was straw, and he stopped writing. So a lot of times these intellectual conversions can be wins, or they can be a starting point. But a lot of times they could also be the seed that's sown on rocky soil, right? The churches, I would believe, should not be like, okay, let's get ready. We got a bunch of people coming in and they're going to be asking us about the nuances of the ontological argument. Certainly, we should be able to have some of that. But ultimately, it is an encounter with Christ in the Blessed Sacrament, with his mercy through through confession, through his saving power, through baptism, right? The church needs to, or should always remember that first and foremost, it is a minister of Christ's grace, not an intellectual club. You can have the greatest saint who was illiterate and didn't know anything about theology, but their sainthood and their witness was a greater sign than some of the greatest theologians. So you have to strike that balance. Look, because people, as technology advances, will get more and more divorced from the real and physical world. The church needs to be that sign of contradiction, that place where incarnation, where a physical nature and an encounter mystically with Christ still happens, because that is what will differentiate the church from, because look, you're going to have millions of different of AIs and different avenues as this technology develops for different trains of thought and whatever. The church should never try to compete with the spirit of an age, because it'll always be the widow of the next, right? The church needs to be timeless, truthful, and that comes through Jesus Christ, his church, and the sacraments that the church ministers.
Yeah, I would like to add to the conversation. Where's the hope in all of these, right? Where is the good news in all of these? So let's just take a look at the most use of AI right now. At least ChatGPT is no longer search, but it has to do with relationships and therapy, right? Of asking about yourself and how to deal with life. That for me is not a bad thing. That's a good thing for us to know and discover this is where people are at. And this is the same needs that we've had for, from the beginning of time. We long for community. We long for people who listen to us. We long for people that can connect with us. That's the good news in all of this, in my mind, that people are turning to this technology for that, but we have the better alternative, right? But what we can do in the church is understand why people are turning to ChatGPT to ask about relationships and about themselves and about the problems and trauma that they have. And what is ChatGPT doing, right, that we may be able to learn in terms of our approach. So, for example, if you enter to ChatGPT anything about your personal life, one of the ways that the ChatGPT is trained to respond is in a very empathetic way. Not judgmental way, is listening to you, or pretending to listen to you. This is a machine, right? That is creating that space for you to open up and to be able to share what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what you're going through, and is giving you an empathetic answer. I think that that's the lesson for us in the church, is that people are still looking for that, for community connection. And they're looking somewhere else. I think we need to step up our game, and we need to be thinking in those terms. And how do we listen to people better? How do we welcome people and meet them where they are at? How do we become a more listening church? Recently, our team was working with the National Federation of Catholic Youth Ministry, and they have an awesome initiative. They receive a grant from, or they're in the process of receiving a grant to help parishes be better at listening and sitting with young people, with youth people in their parishes, just to listen to them. And so that requires certain training. And again, I think ChatGPT and some of these tools are doing that because they're training that way. And we ourselves can train ourselves to be that type of welcoming and listening community. For me, that's the good news. That's where the hope is coming, is, okay, that's what the world needs, and we're really good at that. We can really minister to people where they're at, and we can be that community that they can welcome, that could be welcome in.
I'll jump in on this one too, and really just to echo what Edmundo said, I think I love that phrase. We just have to step up our game. We just really do. So if there's a time, and I don't think there's any denying, and it's great that technology and social media are meeting this generation, a lot of people in the world where they are, showing them the truth, goodness, and beauty of, whether that's just like religion in general, spirituality, or specifically the truths of our faith. There's a lot of people who are coming to ask, who are starting to ask very important questions and getting answers to them, and then are finding their way, one way or another, interested in the Catholic Church. And so when those people come to our parishes, how are we ready to receive them? And I think Edmundo is just nailing it right there. He said we need to be ready to welcome them, radical hospitality, radical welcoming, ready to listen and meet them where they are. And again, not to keep people where they are, but to gently, like our Lord, take them one step at a time. So AI might be really good at a lot of things, but it can never be a person. It can never be a parish community. It can never be a community of people who have friendships and deep relationships. And so if AI can't do that, that's exactly what we need to do. And if AI is a better therapist or a better listener than me, that is on me, and I feel responsible for that, and I need to do better. So I think it's a really interesting problem to have, right? That there's a lot of people who want to come to our parishes, who are excited to come to our parishes, and like maybe our parishes aren't quite ready yet. That's like a very interesting issue. I don't know if that's ever been the case in history, but it's our challenge as a church today to face that. And like Edmundo, I have a lot of hope that I'm just excited to meet people at our parishes. And I think if we're hearing this message from our pastors and our bishops that, hey, let's be welcoming, let's be loving, let's listen, let's be clear doctrinally, but also sensitive pastorally, I think we're going to bear abundant fruit in this generation and bring many people home to the Lord.
Benjamin, can I add one more thing too? Just continuing these, there's a thing about people wanting to be listened and welcomed. There's also the reality that, people are going to lose their jobs to AI, right? People are going to be displaced by AI. I mean, that is an opportunity for us to step up as well, to be there to comfort people as they go through these very difficult transitions. One thing is to be displaced by a human being, but another thing is when your job no longer exists and a machine is doing it, you start asking the different type of questions. And I think that's a great opportunity for the gospel and for us as Christians to minister with the heart of Jesus, is how do we help people navigate these ever-changing contexts? And some things are going to change, right? Like these, talking to Brett Robinson from the McGrath Institute at Notre Dame, he was talking about this media ecology, that AI is not going to just change those that are using it, but changing everyone around us and affecting all of us. But what I see with AI is that it's going to lead people to ask some fundamental questions about who they are, about the dignity of the human person, about what is intelligence, about what is meant to be human. I mean, these are questions where the church has so much wisdom. So I see a lot of hope, and I see a lot of, I honestly see it as a springtime of evangelization, especially with this technology that is touching very deep fundamental questions in every person.
Edmundo, you read my mind, because I wanted to actually go to that part. And the last question I want to ask before we turn to audience questions is with regards to, Pope Leo has spoken quite a bit about artificial intelligence. It's no secret that he took his name from Pope Leo XIII, and the technological transformations that were taking part during his time. And Edmundo, to your point about the displacement and the incredible transition that we're going to be experiencing in the next few years, there was an interesting study that came back from Goldman Sachs, the bank, and they were saying conservatively that they're anticipating more than 30% unemployment by 2030. And of course, there are many economists and technologists who've said, well, this is, that's a very conservative estimate. We're looking at much more, whether it's in automation, driving, video and media production, etc. And that'll be a radical change. And my question to all of you is, if you had the opportunity to speak with Pope Leo and the people around him around this question of artificial intelligence, around this question of technological transformation, what role would you like to see the church and him take in guiding this transition and being this pastor in this moment where, as Edmundo said, this your job's not going to be taken by another person. It's by a robot. And the last thing I want to say is there was an interesting I don't know if you saw this, but the interesting advertisement that really freaked me out. It was a big, huge billboard that said, "Don't hire humans," and it was an AI robot that looked like a person. And I mean, we live in a capitalist society. They're very competitive. We're competing for everything, and of course, the incentives are going to be enormous to arrive at AGI first, to automate as much as you can. We're in a big globalized society. That the fact that so many people will, many young young people, and when there was a young student who saw this poster, and he went to his teacher, and they wrote an article about this, which is why I know about it. He said, "Professor, what's the point? I'm a high potential student. I'm in a college. I'm motivated, but there's no way I'm going to outcode, Claude, which, is already replacing many coders. We're going to be at a point where very, very few people, at the top will be able to be working." And so I guess my question to all of you is if you were had the opportunity and the honor to speak with Pope Leo and all of those around him, as he, crafts the beginning of his pontificate around this, of course, what would you like to see the Vatican and the Holy Father really address?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I'm sure I wouldn't be saying anything that they don't already know, of course. But one of the most fundamental pieces of church teaching is that the inherent dignity of all people. And then, we've also heard, and this was very present in a lot of conversations around social justice and the dignity of labor, but the dignity of our work only exists because of our own inherent dignity that we bring to that. Work doesn't have dignity in itself. Work needs to be dignified because humans are the ones doing it or receiving its fruits. And so I think what I love to see the church leaning more into, and I think we saw a little bit of this with Pope Francis, especially in Dilex et Nos, and the one paragraph on in an artificial intelligence age, what does it mean to be human? And he talked about things like, being with your grandma or writing poetry and things like that. The church leaning into helping all people throughout the world better understand and better live what it means to have inherent dignity as sons and daughters of God, as the creatures of God. So that when we are facing these challenges, we're probably not going to be, as a global church, responding specifically to every challenge that AI creates for the society that we want to build. There will be specific experts at local levels that are able to do that. But what we can do, all of us in our own ways, is lean into understanding that my inherent dignity as a human that was loved into existence by God does not come from my work. And when we navigate those work challenges, that needs to be our most fundamental guiding principle. And that's kind of what I would encourage the church and would love to see the church speak more on in these coming weeks and years.
When you brought up that question, I pulled up the 20 most common jobs from 1820, right before the Industrial Revolution. So how many of you guys, out there listening and on the panel, how many of you guys know millers or tailors or blacksmiths or seamen? Or how many of you know planters? Probably none of you, right?
I have a great tailor.
Well, but it's such a specialty thing. That was one of the most common jobs in the entire marketplace. Those jobs right up there made 70% of the available jobs in 1820 before the Industrial Revolution. You can look to 1920 or 1950. I mean, how many travel agents do you know? How many elevator door operators do you know? Like, jobs always change. I think that a lot of the alarmism over 70% of the working jobs are going to go away is shenanigans. That's not accurate. What it will do, though, is a lot of jobs are going to transition. Jobs that used to happen one way will happen another way, but that will then create opportunities for new jobs. 50 years ago, nobody knew anything about a website coder. No one knew anything about a digital graphic designer or a video editor. Those weren't common jobs. Now those are very common jobs. So the workplace will adapt. So there's some context to human dignity and work there. I don't think that we as humanity have ever really even gotten beyond the wounds caused by the Industrial Revolution. So what can the church answer in that? And we talked about it. The deeper things. What is within the church's purview to answer? Right? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be created in the image and likeness of God? What does it mean that Christ suffered, died, buried, and was resurrected for our behalf? What does it mean that Christ is present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist? Those questions are timeless, right? Those questions will never change. We are created because of that. We are created with those inherent questions in us. The accidental questions of our ages will always change. Like Like, I don't know what's going to happen if the Saracens invade and I'm living in the 1800s, or I don't know, man, Napoleon's really, taken over most of our continent. We can't trade with Britain anymore. What are we going to do for jobs? Or I don't know, the printing press is going to really, get rid of all the scribes. Times change, jobs change, mercantilism changes. There's the timelessness. And if the church continues to focus on the timeless, that is within its purview. And that's what people want. People go to the church for timelessness. We can have responses to the age we live in, but we should never be so married to one age that we become the widow of the next. So I'd like to see Pope Leo really focus on the questions that people are really asking. Why am I here? Why do I matter? Why do I feel empty? Why am I not satisfied by this world? Because it's the same question people were asking 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, and they'll be asking in 50 years. So that would be my advice that I'm sure Pope Leo is listening to and writing notes on.
I'll jump in there if Edmundo doesn't want to right now. So the classical philosophers talked about how intellectual contemplation is like one of the most perfect, if not the most perfect thing that we as humans can do, right? So what separates us from animals or inanimate objects is we have intellect and will. And so using our intellect, using our creators as sub-creators under God, the creator, is the most fulfilling we can do, the most fulfilling thing we can do in this life. So what's really interesting about technology now is it's taking away this kind of obligation where we have to spend so much time doing things that aren't really intellectual or creative. Not that we got to sit around and read or write poetry all the time, although I might enjoy that, but just enjoying the goodness and truth and beauty of creation, enjoying deep human connections and relationships. A lot of times mundane tasks pull us away from those things that make us truly alive and make us truly human. So I think this is a really exciting time where people are going to actually have both the challenge and the opportunity to live more creative, intellectual human lives rather than being sort of like, I keep thinking like if a robot can do it, then why do you want to, right? Like if a robot can do it, let the robot do it. You can do something that's uniquely human that only you as a human can do. People can take your job, robots can take your job, AI can take your job. No one and nothing can ever take your God-given calling. So I think this would be really cool for Pope Leo to emphasize, is that there's a big difference between your job and your vocation, or your job and your calling. God has created each person for a unique mission, given them a unique purpose and a unique set of gifts. And that doesn't always equate, or it can't be reduced down to someone's job only. So if I haven't actually put in the time or spent time with the Lord to discern actively and deeply what he made me for, what gifts he's given me, and what he's calling me to do with my life, this is an awesome opportunity, because if I lose my job, it actually just highlights this most important question that any of us can ask, which is, what was I created for? What is God calling me to do with my life? And no one, no matter how sophisticated AI ever gets, no one can ever take that God-given calling away from you.
Well said.
Yeah, I'll add my part. I love everybody's response. I would say these to Pope Leo, but also to any bishop, priest, any lay ecclesial minister, anybody that is in a leadership position in the church. I would say we need to have three moves from ignorance to wisdom, right? We need to provide people wisdom that the church has. I think bishops and people at the Vatican and the Pope, they can provide that wisdom that we have. The two other that are very important to me, one is move from fear to confidence. I feel that this is a big part of what the church is about. It's about helping people, not be afraid, knowing that God is with us, and knowing that we have a way forward. And then also move from despair to hope. Where are the good news in all of these? I think if the church emphasizes these three things of wisdom and sharing the wisdom that we have and everything that was said today, we lead people with confidence and we lead them with hope. I think those are the three most important things that we can do during this AI and robotics revolution.
Beautiful. And I think that's a perfect place for us to end. Edmundo, Ryan, Zach, and Emily, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you to all of you who are watching online. Be sure to tune in at our next one, which will be in December. So thank you so much, and God bless.